from the state legislature. Representatives from the state legislature represent their districts, and in those districts they have constituents that have different kinds of problems, whether they're Republican, Democrat, Independent, or even non-voting. These last 2 years that I've been in this district, I have observed over 20 different parents suffering from cited, trespassed, arrested, removed from basketball games, fired from their jobs, had their children taken away, kids who have committed suicide who are now on drugs with mental health problems. These last 2 years, there's been one hell of a family crisis collectively in District 7. And so for me, the town hall that I'm involved in has nothing to do with the personalities or taking things personal when it comes to representation. Our republic was designed a representative republic, where representatives are elected by their constituents to participate in producing laws, policies, and oversight regarding funding, the saving of life, the taking of life, and all of these things in our amazing country. Our town hall meetings existed for a year this month, and over this last year, we've invited the incumbent, our representative, to attend our town hall meetings to hear from parents and business owners, nurses, Department of Highway Patrol members who've lost their jobs, etc., to hear what they're going through based on the policies that are created by the legislature, that are enforced by the governor, and then could be manipulated by school boards across our district. And so, the fact that our incumbent representative has chosen not to appear at tonight's forum, for whatever the reason, based on family crisis or not, these last 2 years have been a massive collective family crisis for this district, for this state, and for this nation. New York State had tens of thousands of elderly people die alone in nursing homes because of the governor's policies in New York. The same in this state. Thousands upon thousands of elderly people dying alone without their family saying goodbye. Those policies have oversight in our state legislature. Whether it's kids committing suicide or old people dying alone in the old folks' home, the policies for that originate in the legislature. And it is up to our representatives to represent us. And so I'm giving you this impassioned talk before we moderate this debate, because this is not personal. And so from a nonverbal standpoint, we have created a cardboard cutout of our representative, not because of their family crisis, but because for these last 2 years, our town hall team has not had representation. And all I'm asking on behalf of my family, on behalf of my child, it's the only reason I do what I do. I really don't care about anything else in terms of like the politics of it all. And so we've invited over and over again, and we have not received a response, or when we did, it was always a back out at the last minute. And so this is not personal. This is absolutely about representation only. There are over, I don't know how many constituents are there in District 7? Tens of thousands. Tens of thousands. And so just from our little town hall, the Turning Point USA high schoolers who put this on expecting their representative to be a part of this effort to represent them, we're going to have the cardboard cut out as a representative, and then we have the other candidate who is challenging the incumbent, Lonnie Williams. So if you'll come forward. They already know the rules. Each of the candidates will receive the same amount of time. Each will be given an opportunity to respond. And then we will send these questions out to the incumbent to see if we can get a verbal or written response for the high school students, for our town hall, and for those folks that have wondered for the last 2 years what does representation look like in District 7. So let's go ahead and get started. So the candidates have 2 minutes to give an introduction. And by the way, the timer will put up the times when you're ready.
Okay, it's working. Well, first off, thank you for everyone who decided to show up today and come on out. It's important to participate in our government and in the process. It's important to show up when we're needed, and right now we're needed more than ever in this country. A little bit about myself. I was born on, well, not on a ranch, but I was born when my father was a rancher, and grew up most of my life in a quarter horse farm, just working, hard working. 17 now, when I was 17, I joined the military, and 12 hours after graduation, I found myself on the plane of basic training. And through a little bit through that process, I was selected for the Presidential Honor Guard, and I found myself living and working in Washington, D.C., looking and experiencing a lot of history that I never knew existed. And through that process, I fell in love with this country in a way that I didn't know was possible. I fell in love with our rights, our responsibilities, our history, and at that point in time, I knew that there was more to it. And along the course of this journey in my life, I started a publication with my family called The Pamphlet. And what we do is we teach about liberty, freedom, we talk about our founding fathers and those sort of things. And a lot of people said, hey, you should run for office. This is exactly the type of people that we want. We want people who know our Constitution. And so, long story short, that's what got me involved in this. And I've learned along the way that we are in far more great trouble and far more difficulty than I could have ever imagined. So showing up and participating is more important than ever. One of the things that really got me into this is my family, and you'll hear them probably hooting and hollering along this process. And I think that's the best motivator in the world for any one of us. Because when we look at history, we see that our founding fathers, our ancestors, our relatives, they wanted the exact same thing that we did, and that's the ability to raise our children in our own ways and in our own ways, cultures, and faith. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Maycumber. All right, no comment. All right, so we're going to change this into questions from the Turning Point USA folks. Yeah, come over there. You can hold on to that. So this is Anna, the president of TPUSA here.
With more money being sent to schools and the quality of education decreasing, if you could change how public schools are run, what would you change?
Well, the number one thing, besides making parents the primary stakeholders in the upbringing of their children, speaking to education directly, is to make sure that every education dollar goes directly to the student. Over the years, we've increased how much education dollars we've spent on each student to the whopping tone of about $18,000 per student. Now, if we turned around and made that money attached to the student instead of a failing institution, that would solve a lot of the problems that we automatically have. That parent would then have the option to spend that money if they're on homeschooling, on quality books, quality education. They could also spend that money on private school. And if somebody had somebody with autism or something with special needs, they'd be able to support their child that way. How many parents work so many different jobs just to simply be able to keep their children in public school and to pay for daycare, when if they had access to each one of those $18,000, they would be able to provide a world-class education. And within a few generations, most of the problems and challenges within our education system would completely solve themselves. The union wouldn't be so important because parents would be competing to send their children to the best place to educate their children.
How do you feel about extending human rights to animals, robots, corporations, etc.?
Can you repeat that, please?
How do you feel about extending human rights to animals, robots, corporations, etc.?
I'm absolutely opposed to that. I'm a bit of a biblical man, and I believe that man was coming here, was given stewardship and dominion over this world. And to say that inanimate objects or corporations or other things have the exact same rights as humans, that's not conducive. It doesn't fall within line of our founding fathers' vision. These rights were designed for individual people. They were not designed to be extended to corporations. Our founding fathers didn't have corporations at the beginning of our country for a reason. They didn't want to have the same problems that they had with the British Empire and their problems extend into the current, their new government that they formed. So they did not want to extend rights to corporations. They did not want to extend rights to animals, to inanimate objects, to things like that. The rights were designed explicitly to a human being. A corporation in and of itself does not have any rights when it's born. These rights are designed and come from a higher power. So a corporation doesn't come from a higher power, it's a construct of man. So it doesn't, in my view, qualify for the same extension of rights.
What are your thoughts on public schools' empty seats being voted?
I'm glad you asked this question. This is one of the most frustrating things in local minds. We have a large population of people who homeschool their children, private school their children, charter school, co-op, various other methods of education. And when we are pulling our children out of the public institutions, we're pulling them out because we don't agree with the style of education. We don't agree with the indoctrination of our children. We don't agree with the grooming of our children. We don't agree with them invalidating our parental rights. And so when we're doing this, and we have legislators that turn around and decide to fund those empty seats, what they're actually doing is they're funding those programs we don't agree with. They're funding the over-sexualization of our children. They're funding the racist hatred that they're teaching our children. And they're doing that at a greater proportion than they were before because there's more dollars available for less students to enact these radical programs. So they have more funding to pursue it. So it makes it so that those children who are left in school have an even more difficult chance and opportunity to get a fair education.
Who's the primary stakeholder in a child's upbringing?
That's be the parents. That's my number one platform issue, is to ensure that parents have the right to raise their children in their own way. Parents have the right to be the primary stakeholders in the upbringing of their children. What that means in government speak is that parents need to be acknowledged as the primary institution in raising their children. Parents have the right to raise their children in their own way, in their own traditions, in their own faith, educate them on their own curriculum. This is something that our founding fathers came here for. This is something my ancestors came here for. Most of our ancestors came here for the opportunity to raise our families in our own ways, in our own traditions. And if we don't have a leadership that agrees that parents are the primary stakeholders in their children's upbringing, it doesn't matter what else we're fighting for. It doesn't matter if we lower taxes. It doesn't matter if we bring our troops home. It doesn't matter if all of a sudden we have universal health care, everything's taken care of and everyone can afford it. No matter what pipe dream somebody can dream up, it doesn't matter if we cannot acknowledge that parents have the right to raise their children in their own ways and traditions.
How do you feel about guns being, or schools being gun-free zones?
Well, one thing I know about criminals is they don't obey the laws. So only law-abiding citizens obey the laws. And wherever we take a gun-free zone, what that is a target-rich opportunity for somebody who wants to do bad things to good people. So when we turn around and make something a gun-free zone, then we take the ability away for perhaps teachers who are permitted, parents who have the permit to come in and be able to defend themselves should something happen. One of the things I've noticed that in cities, not only in the United States, but throughout the world, wherever gun ownership and training is mandated, i.e. requirement, they have some of the lowest crime rates in the world. Israel had a problem with school shootings, and they instituted a program to where they train teachers and trained individuals in firearms. They keep them on them, and they don't have a problem anymore. Their school shooting problem, their terrorist attacks on their school systems completely went away. So hardening a facility by training individuals is the best way to stop these school shootings and mass things that happen. Not turning around and making them gun-free zones.
What are your thoughts on state education funding following the students?
Well, as I said before, that's what I believe should happen. Again, we spend over $18,000 per student, and every time we have increased the amount of dollars per student that we spend, our test scores have gone down. That to me is a recipe for disaster. That to me tells us that what we're doing is wrong. And if we continue to do the same thing that we've been doing just by throwing money at it, my guess is test scores will continue to go down. But I can say with some degree of certainty that I don't need $18,000 to educate my child. We've been homeschooling for a while now, and it usually costs us about $500–600 per year for all the books and teachers editions for that. Be nice to be able to throw in a couple of lab experiments and some things like that, but I don't need $18,000 to make this work. I'm pretty sure a lot of charter schools don't need $18,000 to make it work. And so I believe that we could take half of that amount of money and actually distribute it and apply it directly to the child's education, and that would solve these problems. I believe that is the way to go going forward. What we have been doing hasn't been working, and it's time to try something different.
Thank you. So this question is for candidate Williams. So this last legislative session, there were a number of bills related to the Washington School Directors Association. One of those bills, the incumbent voted to give that organization the ability to select superintendents for education service districts, which are not the same thing as school boards. Do you agree with that decision, and if not, why?
No, the reason I don't is by giving this power, this authority to the Washington School Directors Association, that takes the power out of, we need to be able to elect somebody into these positions where the people have control over who these supervisors are and who the individuals are that make these choices. If we just give it to WASDA, well, WASDA is a state-mandated association, but WASDA is the causation of a lot of challenges within our school system and a lot of the policies coming out that parents don't agree with. So giving them more power and authority is absolutely not the right thing to do right now. The power and authority needs to be given back to the people, and the people need to be able to choose the best school directors and the best employees that are fit for their areas.
Recently, the Tonasket School District, the place where we're holding the forum, the school board was introduced a policy recognizing parents as the primary stakeholder in their children's upbringing, but WASDA, Washington School Directors Association, came out in line items, specifically those lines. Why is that a good or a bad thing related to WASDA?
Well, and it's not. This is just another example of WASDA getting involved in your local school board. Now, WASDA does not want local parents to have local control over their school districts. And anything that we do to take away that power is threatening to them. So we managed to sneak in parents or primary stakeholders in Republic. I think probably the first place in the country that did so. And that's probably because they weren't paying attention. I think now they're paying attention, and they don't want this to become a trend. They don't want it to be acknowledged that parents have a role in education. Because as it stands right now, in their minds, and many of these educators' minds, parents don't have a role. When the children go to school, they belong to them, and that's their mentality, and that's what we need to change.
Representative Maycumber, you voted for the bill to give WASDA more control. Do you have any response to candidate Williams' contention that WASDA is bad for parental rights? Okay, so then this question is for candidate Williams. Do you support the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction, known as OSPI, being appointed position by the governor, or should it remain an elected position?
I don't believe in appointeds. Appointeds are a way for a political power to influence local control. Instead, what needs to happen is the people need to be able to elect the representative that is best going to represent them. And the governor himself is an elected individual and should not be appointing these people that control our education system.
Representative Maycumber, if you are re-elected, will you support the governor and the OSPI's current OSPI members' attempt to appoint the position, or leave it as an elected position? Okay, So in your campaign, candidate Williams, you've stated that Representative Maycomber voted to give money to schools for empty seats in schools, but that has been rebutted by her campaign. How do you respond?
You know, there's a couple of rebuttals, and the first one was, I never did it. And when she was referencing that, she was talking about HB 1590. And if you look at the roll calls on that, you will see, in fact, that she actually did vote for that one. But it doesn't start there. It actually starts at HB 1476 a year earlier, which is the exact same bill, same language, accomplishes the same thing, called an Enrollment Stabilization Act. Now, she voted for that along with a lot of other representatives that basically funded the school system at the exact same enrollment levels, even though people were pulling their children out as we were seeing what they were teaching our children. So she voted to fund the schools at the high enrollment levels from a year prior. And again, a year later when she voted to do this, there was a first bill which she calls a striker bill, which she says it's okay to put your name on a bill that is a placeholder, and it's basically a blank check, and they can change everything on the entire bill later. It's just a placeholder, and that vote means nothing. So the excuse is, first, I didn't do it. Second was, well, I did it, but I only did it as a placeholder to completely rewrite the whole thing, and then when it didn't work out, I didn't do it. But if you look back, she has a history of doing it. She did it in 1476. She also did it in 1590, the first roll call, and this story speaks for itself.
Representative Maycomber, do you have any rebuts? All right, so this question is for Representative Maycomber. In 2019, a report was released by the Democrat Party called the Rampart Report. 18 minutes after the report was released, the leadership, Republican leadership, of which you're a member of, withdrew Representative Matt Shea's membership from the caucus. How do you respond to that in terms of the appearance of a collusion with the Democrat Party in relationship to a sitting representative who was duly elected in his district? How would you respond to that? Candidate Williams, I know that you've been over to the Stevens County area, which a number of constituents were affected by the results of that report, which named them as domestic terrorists, extreme white, anti-government extremists. The Democrats and the media then began to label one of those individuals, a young man named Patrick Cochran, who was teaching young men summer camp and how to do obstacle courses. The media labeled that as a training camp for future domestic terrorists as a result of that report. How do you characterize that? As a representative, would you do the same thing? Would you collude with the Democrats? Would you collude with the media to affect your district constituents that way?
No, I wouldn't do that at all. I mean, that's a political hit job, and what I've witnessed in my time is this is something that is frequently happens time and time again. I spoke with the individuals that you spoke about recently. I've heard of their story firsthand from them. And what a representative is supposed to do is when your civil rights are being trumped on or attacked or you're being unfairly treated, a representative is supposed to be there for you. You're supposed to be able to call up the phone and say, hey, I don't know what's going on here, but I think I'm supposed to be able to talk here and get my voice out. What do I do? And the representative is supposed to come on down and say, that's okay, I'm going to hold your hand and we're going to go to this board meeting together and I'm just going to make sure that they're treating you fairly. This doesn't happen anymore. We don't have this type of representation. And this is exactly why I'm running, because we need those type of people who are going to stand up for you and you and you and everybody here. Regardless of how you voted or what you do, you need that representative to stand up for you and say, hey, this isn't right. It's like people getting fired, good nurses, good doctors getting fired because they made a medical choice that they can't violate their conscience. Where was the representation standing up for them? I was on the steps of our Capitol standing up for them. And when I came and asked her, are you going to stand up for them? Nope. So where's the representation? That's the question we need to ask, is where is the representation?
So if re-elected or elected, this is to both of you, would you support a state law that requires local and state law enforcement to verify national security threat assessments and provide evidence of an international terrorism connection before committing resources to so-called domestic terrorism cases in the state of Washington?
You know, this strikes pretty near and dear to my heart, because I've been writing this pamphlet for a couple of years, and to a lot of people, hey, I was a patriot and a person who talks about God and country, but 20 minutes after I filed, I was characterized as a constitutional terrorist. So I know what this feels like, to be labeled and to be branded just because you don't fit somebody else's mold. And we need to be careful, because we have law enforcement who are now going into other people's homes and losing the credibility that they've taken years to uphold. And we need representatives to stand against that type of behavior. We need representatives to stand up and say, hey, you know what? Not in our backyard. You need probable cause. We have a constitution, and we operate under rules of law, and that's the type of representation that you need, not one that doesn't show up.
Representative Maycumber, same question to you. Would you support a state law that would require local and state law enforcement to verify national security threat assessments and provide evidence of an international terrorism connection before committing the state's law enforcement resources to so-called domestic terrorism cases? Okay, next question. So if elected, re-elected Representative Maycumber, what do you plan to accomplish in the first 90 days in office? Same question to you, Candidate Williams. What do you plan to accomplish should you be elected in the first 90 days in office?
You know, the first thing is to establish the greatest representation vehicle that mankind has ever known in this country. And how I managed to do that is I'm going to set up a town hall in every single one of the 7 counties that I represent. And my commitment and my promise is to have a town hall once a month in every single one of those counties. And that means that everyone has access to their representative. Everyone will know where their representative is going to be. And if somebody wants to lobby me, they have to come there, and they need to do it in front of you, the people. And when they ask me, hey, I want a gas station on every corner, I'm going to turn to you and say, what say you? Because that's what a representative is supposed to do. So I'm going to set this high bar of representation to where everybody has access to their representative. And everybody will know what bills are coming. And I'm going to turn to them and say, how do you want me to vote? And they will tell me how I'm going to vote. Because that's what a representative does. When we vote for a representative, we vote for someone who's going to carry our voice forward. How can they do that if they won't answer the phone?
Okay, do we have any other questions from the audience? Any comments, feedback? Okay, so we have 2-minute conclusion, your outro. We'll start with Representative Maycumber. Candidate Williams.
First off, thanks again for coming. Thanks again for showing up. That is the most important thing that we can do, is show up. When we make commitments to serve, we must fulfill those obligations. When I joined the military, I didn't have the option to say, you know what, my kid's got an ear infection, I'm going to sit this one out. I took that oath to serve and defend the Constitution seriously. And that meant that my primary obligation was to provide the type of service that the people expected out of me, a soldier at the time. And if you send me as a representative, you will get that same type of commitment, that no matter what, if my family is sick, no matter what, if there is a chaos going on in the world, you will have someone here that will show up, that will represent, that will take your voice forward and stand up on your behalf. And I'd greatly appreciate it if you stand with me in making parents the primary stakeholders in their children's lives, ensuring that education dollars goes to the children, not to failing institutions, and to make sure that we bring our communities together to work together so that we can feed each other, make it through the food crisis we're going through, and build our communities the way they need to be. And thank you for the opportunities, and I greatly appreciate your vote.
All right. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for coming. When is your guys' next TPUSA meeting?
I don't know the date.
Not yet, okay. Second Saturday of every month from 1 to 3 in Oroville? Okay. Okay. So a few more announcements we have here. There is a Center for Self-Governance class tomorrow, September 20th at 6 p.m. online. We have some handouts here for anybody who wants the information on that. September 27th, there is a Washington State Constitution course online. The next school board meeting in Tonasket is September 28th at 6:30 p.m. And I believe that the stakeholder policy is going to be on that agenda. And then our next town hall for Tonasket will be back at the Foursquare Church October 17th, right? Monday, October 17th. So we will be there. Lonnie will be here for a while for anybody who wants to go back and visit him. We have Jerry Osmussen here running for PUD Commissioner. Do you want to say something? No? You're just here to listen. Okay. All right, so.
Can I say something about
Yes.
the primary stakeholder?
Yes.
So on September 28th here at the Tonasket School Board meeting, I'd really encourage you to come because the policy that was introduced is the one that's being copied directly from the Ferry County policy regarding parents as the primary stakeholder in their children's upbringing, partnering with the school districts and the state legislature as it should be. But WASDA sent in someone to line item veto that out of the policy. And so that's going to be the primary discussion on September 28th. So we'd really like to encourage you to participate in that if you believe that parents are the primary stakeholder in their children's upbringing and should have a proper partnership with the school districts and the state legislature and their representatives. I highly encourage you to be there September 28th. Thank you so much. Pam, do you have anything? Okay. Anybody else? Comments, ideas, thoughts, feedbacks? We got one back here.
I like to look out. No, I'm not listening. You know, I was watching and read lots about domestic terrorism and this kind of things, but people should look into Homeland Security Act, which was signed by President Bush. And there is a line which has the rights, government has the rights to mark you as a domestic terrorist. They are discussing about it before it was signed and never ever done nothing about it. So if I start kicking the tables around here, Homeland Security can mark me as a terrorist. And I think that's wrong because these laws in Homeland Security Act may have a rights government to make people domestic terrorists.
Sir, your accent, what country are you originally from?
I'm from Europe.
The Czech Republic. So this is really important what this gentleman is bringing up. I would encourage you to go to our website, centerforselfgovernance.com/PWOL. It stands for Political Weaponization of Labels. This began starting in 1992 with the term white supremacy. It was used to justify the use of deadly force in Ruby Ridge, Idaho. It was again used in 1993 at Waco, right-wing extremism and Christian cult, to justify the use of deadly force in Waco. It was then used to justify the 1996 Anti-Terrorism Act as a result of Timothy McVeigh, the disgruntled military veteran who blew up a federal building in Oklahoma City. The Anti-Terrorism Act of 1996 allows the Department of Justice to quietly withhold exculpatory evidence in somebody who is labeled a national security threat. In 2001, under Title 18, Section 230.31, Part 3 and Part 5, domestic terrorism is defined as anyone who appears to intend to coerce or intimidate a civilian population, government policy, or a government official. In 2009, Janet Napolitano in the Department of Homeland Security wrote what's called the Extremism Lexicon in March of 2009. I highly recommend you download and read that document, because in that document it's just a series of 40 definitions. Those definitions primarily label right-wing as hate group, anti-government, reject federal authority, patriot movement, constitutionalist, Christian, white supremacist, sovereign citizen, common law, etc. Those labels were then used under the Obama administration to label the Tea Party movement at the time, which I understand Charlie Kirk was an original member of back at the time, as extreme white anti-government terrorists. Senator John McCain colluded with the IRS to target Tea Party groups around the United States, to have the IRS come to their organizations as C4s, asking them for their donor list, their meeting minutes, their agenda, who attended their meetings. Me personally, I was a member of the Tea Party movement back then. I was new to politics in the United States. I spent my entire upbringing in South Korea and my military career in Tokyo, Japan. When I got involved, it wasn't because I hated a black man in the White House. It was because of fiscal responsibility, small government, etc. But a Republican senator from the state of Arizona colluded with the Democrats and the IRS administration under Obama to label me an extreme white anti-government terrorist. On April 2nd, 2010, my congressman, a Democrat, Steve Cohen from Memphis, Tennessee, said my Tea Party had forgot our white sheets and robes. Now, I lived in Memphis, Tennessee at the time where Martin Luther King was assassinated. So I had my car key, my tires slashed, and fecal matter thrown on my house. So for me, this is a very serious matter. When a Republican senator from the state of Arizona colludes with Democrats to weaponize the IRS against citizens of the United States who are lawfully participating in political activities. And so in 2016, a rancher in the state of Oregon was shot in the back 3 times by Oregon State Police because he had been labeled by the FBI as a national security threat to the United States of America. That national security threat assessment was falsified by the Bureau of Land Management Special Agent in Charge, Dan Love, who gave it to his good friend, Greg Bretzing, the FBI Director of Oregon. To this day, the media has not corrected the facts that he was shot in the back 3 times after he had been shot at 6 times. While the FBI agents overseeing the operation were picking up their shells and violating the crime scene. The widow to this day, in a lawsuit, the judge in her case, a federal judge, says, I need to stick a fork in her wrongful death lawsuit. She's now appealing this case, but the facts in the matter don't seem to matter to the media, to the Democrat Party, and to Republicans like Senator John McCain or Liz Cheney, who don't seem to understand that when you weaponize labels against the American people, and you weaponize government as a result, and that's why I'm just following what this gentleman said, because he's seen it himself in those countries. When you weaponize labels, inevitably it results in the weaponization of government. So I encourage you, please go to our website, centerforselfgovernance.com/PWOL. Please, for the sake of our country and the weaponization of labels and government, whether you like Donald Trump or not, due process should matter, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican. If you're going to go coerce and intimidate Supreme Court justices at their homes and not be held accountable to Title 18, Section 2331, Part 5 of the U.S. Code, but January 6 people are criticized by Republicans for saying there's something wrong with the election system, and they're still in jail, like Angel Harrison's husband, Ken Harrelson, who's going on trial on September 26th in Washington, D.C., with a tainted jury. It should matter to every American, whether you're Democrat, Republican, or Independent. The party should take second place to national security like this. And I just encourage you one more time, centerforselfgovernance.com/PWOL, political weaponization of labels. It always leads to the weaponization of government, whether it's the Czech Republic or the United States in 2022. And just to wrap up my preaching, Lonnie's in the back waiting to talk to you. So thank you guys so much for coming tonight.